Hello everyone, thanks for joining. Welcome to One Tech World. Who has heard about the claim that you can do everything quicker with AI? Now, I imagine many of you in front of your screens are nodding or even raised your hands a little. Well, I have heard it. I have heard it over and over and over. I heard it a lot. Now, I am a curious product manager who likes to understand the reason behind things. I enjoy building products, and I also coach people on how to build more valuable products and grow in their careers. I currently do this under Product Kind, a brand that I created to collaborate on products that create a positive social impact, and where I can also support women and non-binary professionals in their product journey. So I went to investigate to see if there is merit to this claim. I set out to do what I'm good at, coaching people, and in this case, to coach them to write user stories, but this time with AI. Before involving AI, let's just see what user stories are. It seems like a simple concept, but over my past 8 years in product, I saw many people struggle with crafting them effectively. That leads to frustrated teams and ineffective products. This guy is Ken Beck. He came up with the concept of user stories in the late 1990s as part of the extreme programming framework. Initially, he called them as stories because they are intended to spark conversations. His goal with user stories were to shift away from the rigid document-heavy requirements gathering and rather understand what outcome the user wants to achieve. And also to create a shared understanding within the product team of what we want to solve for our users. Shared understanding happens when we all understand what the other person is imagining and why. Just an example that proves documents don't result in shared understanding. If we write a specification or user story, it doesn't mean we understand the same thing by it in our product team. As this cake proves it, it says, literally, just write wedding cake. It's not so much the structure that makes it challenging to create effective user stories, but rather the critical thinking it requires and the collaboration within the product team that needs to happen for it to be useful. When I say product team, I mean the product manager, developers, and designer. If there are other roles in your team, then them as well. There are a few mistakes that I've frequently seen with user stories. The first one is that stories are often too large. It could result in developers working on a single story for a week or two, and they become demotivated and frustrated because they don't feel a sense of progress. In these cases, we also realize too late that we didn't have common understanding and they implemented something different than the product manager or designer thought they agreed on. Identifying edge cases can be challenging. If we miss this to do, our users will be confused once they try to do something that we haven't accounted for. Similarly, if we miss implementing error handling, our users will be frustrated because they won't understand what they did wrong or what happened. I've also seen stories only focusing on either the backend or on the front end of the application. If the story doesn't cover a small slice of an end-to-end functionality that our user actually will do in our product, then we might test the front end separately and the backend separately, but it won't guarantee that the feature will work seamlessly end-to-end from the user's perspective. Just because we are talking about features, it's easy to forget what outcome our users will be able to achieve as a result of using that feature. By focusing too much on outputs, we risk not creating user value, nor a positive business impact. Since our feature is live, it's not guaranteed our users will find it valuable and actually will use it. And finally, if we in the product team don't have a common understanding of what our users want to achieve, how can we create a valuable product and make sure our team is excited about it? To see if AI was helpful in coaching people to write better user stories, I asked Claude to write one. I prompted it. Please write a user story. My team is working on a restaurant booking platform. Our persona is Tim, a foodie who enjoys going to restaurants. They need to be able to book a table, edit the booking, and cancel it if needed. You can see that I added 3 different actions here: booking a table, editing, and canceling a booking. I gave a little context about our persona and product. Claude replied with a document with 3 stories and mentioned that it followed the standard structure. As a user, I want to do something so that I can achieve a benefit. Let's see the stories it created. I grabbed the first story, making a reservation, and the third one, canceling a reservation, that Claude wrote. By first look, they seem fine, but if we look more closely at the acceptance criteria, we can see it packs in a huge amount of work. In the first story, once the user edits some needed data, a confirmation is shown and receives a confirmation email. Now this, sending a confirmation email, actually needs an email to be styled, an email service integrated, so it definitely should be a separate story. In the second story, we have team locating their existing booking, so it requires some sort of overview page or search functionality. Then we have receiving the confirmation email and notifying the restaurant that wasn't even mentioned when Tim booked the table in the first place. So this is not really a great set of stories, and it actually makes sense that we got such a mediocre output. Let's see why. Because AI models are trained using vast amount of data from books, online resources, and publicly available information. And there is a lot of inaccurate information on the internet. How it works is that these large language models predict the next word based on patterns in training data. They don't think, per se, like humans, but recognize statistical relationships in text. They generate output that looks correct, but AI has limitations and requires judgment by a human to ensure accuracy and reliability. It doesn't ask for clarification when it's uncertain, doesn't ask for additional details, it's overconfident. So I started to think, if I give it context on what a good user story looks like, it should be able to coach people on creating impactful stories. I didn't want to outsource writing user stories to AI. Rather, I wanted it to superpower our thinking. When we think through the scenarios, that's why I wanted to stir it towards the coaching mindset. If you're using code as your preferred large language model, then you can create projects where you can add knowledge that Claude uses to inform its replies in all the chats that you start from this project. It's a paid feature, but if you're using a free tier, you can add this knowledge as a prompt in the chat. You can also give it a tone of voice, a style that Claude will reply in. I will show you how I created this AI-powered product coach called Story Partner, so you can also create your own. In this project, you can add content from your machine, Google Drive, or GitHub. It will show up in your project knowledge. You can also set project instructions that Claude will consider when you are chatting with it. I use Claude's paid version, so I created a project here. But as I mentioned, you can add all this information that I show into a single chat. You will just have to do that every single time you start a new chat to give it context. To add information to the project knowledge, you can ask yourself, what makes a good user story? For me, it's the aspects that I mentioned earlier. So I added the following things to the project knowledge. The text you can see on this slide is the content that I added to the project instructions. I just put it here in case it's useful for you, so you can use it. I will send you the slides if you message me. I'll have my LinkedIn contact on the last slide, so feel free to reach out. The key here when giving this information is that you give it in a structured format. That way you'll get better outputs. So be clear and detailed. I used headings here for improved visual hierarchy and readability. I grouped related topics under different sections. You should also use positive and negative examples, do step-by-step reasoning, specify things you want to see in the output. What I really struggled with was getting Claude to slice the story to small enough pieces, so it doesn't mix in seemingly small details that actually require significant implementation effort. If you look at this acceptance criteria written in Gherkin about successfully booking a table at a restaurant on a booking platform, we still have that email sending action in there. So this is why I had to be very specific in the project instructions and added this part in the beige box. External service integrations must be separate stories. And I also give an example that helps the large language model to give better outputs. Setting the tone of voice. This is available in both free and paid versions. If you go to the style in Claude, you will see preset styles you can choose from or create your own. I advise you to create your own so it will write in a personalized style. You can either upload a writing sample and then Claude will distill the style of it, or you can specify what's important for you via describing your objective or your audience, voice and tone, or you can add custom instructions. Which one you choose depends on really how clear you are on your style. And the side note here, if you've ever tried to create any written content with generative AI, a LinkedIn post, a blog post, setting the tone of voice really helps with omitting making it sound very AI and using superlatives and very overconfident adjectives. What I choose to do is to specify the style instructions manually. I wanted it to write as a seasoned product management mentor who asks probing questions and strategic questions to stimulate deeper thinking, to use a warm conversational first-person tone that feels like an experienced colleague offering candid advice. I wanted it to craft sentences that are direct and clear, balancing professional insights with personal authenticity, to ask thought-provoking questions that challenge assumptions and encourage critical thinking, and to use strategic formatting like M-dashes, bold text, and concise paragraphs to emphasize key insights, and to maintain and encourage growth-oriented approach that feels supportive yet intellectually rigorous. And importantly, to keep an outcome-oriented view when talking about building products. This is the output I got after setting all this info in the product knowledge, fine-tuning it through testing it several times, and setting a writing style for Claude. In the output, you can see that it already mentions what multiple actions, that these multiple actions should be separate stories. It asks a few strategic questions to make the person think. Then on the right-hand side, you can see the story itself. It created the acceptance criteria. It's written in Gherkin because that's what I added into the project instructions. And you can see that the email sending is no longer part of the acceptance criteria. Hooray! It also mentions some technical considerations that can trigger conversations in the product team and suggests some success metrics that also makes the team think about what we want to achieve. It also adds some comments on potential future stories, payment processing, or special requests. Now, you might be thinking if you could do this with other large language models. The answer is absolutely. However, I tried the same with ChatGPT, creating a GPT, but it gave me quite different results than Claude, and I prefer Claude. In general, I find it's a kinder large language model. I vibe with it more. How did my next iteration look like? So I wanted to share it with other product teams so they can try it and hopefully benefit from it in their daily activities. I know quite many people who are transitioning into product roles and could use this guidance. But I couldn't share the project via Claude if they are outside of my organization. So I decided to create an experimental product out of this. I asked myself, how could I create a proof of concept quickly? There are more and more AI-powered applications that code a product for you just by prompting it. So I went to Perplexity, an AI-powered search engine that synthesizes information, and asked it to compare 5 AI-powered prototyping tools along 5 different dimensions that I found important for this experiment. I didn't want to code, so one of my criteria was that it needed to be usable by non-developers. I wanted to create a prototype quickly. I wanted my product to be visually appealing. It had to support integrating with Cloud API. And I wanted to deploy the final app to production so others can try it. I ended up choosing Lovable. Its promise is to create an app from an idea in seconds. Well, I went to find out that this claim is only true if you don't care about the exact behavior of the app. In Lovable, basically, you can chat with the AI and build an application through it. It can have a database, use APIs, and you can also deploy it to production. So whatever you build, it can be used by other people. The final product will be under a Lovable subdomain. The final app I created has a cookie consent banner because I added some analytics tools. It's a basic chat interface, as you can see, where our users can chat with Story Partner and be coached on writing user stories. There's also an about page with a brief description of the product. And the necessary legal documents. I created terms of use, privacy policy, and cookie policy to make sure that we align with the legal requirements. I started with the expectation that it's going to be quick and easy, as this is the message that comes from everywhere on social media and from websites of such tools. As Lovable promised, I did idea to app in seconds. The reality was that I did spend seconds, exactly 57,000 seconds to build Story Partner. So at the end of the day, it didn't lie. That's more or less 2 days, and it's definitely not perfect. But I learned that if I'm proud of the iteration of our product that we release, then we probably spent too long time perfecting it instead of getting user feedback as quickly as possible. So I just went with it. I identified several risks with using such a tool. So Lovable claims that it's a superhuman full-stack engineer. If you are not tech-savvy at all, that sounds comforting, but then you need to learn quickly because there were a couple of cases where I'd expect an engineer to clarify certain questions before going ahead and implementing it. One of such cases was its implementation of Anthropic's API. And Anthropic has different models with different prices, and it implemented Claude 3 Opus. That is its priciest model. To be exact, it costs 5 times as much as Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And the Sonnet model is actually perfect for our use case. So when I had to buy credits upfront for the Anthropic API, things got real. It can get really expensive if you don't pay attention. Luckily, I spotted it in the code and manually corrected it to the model I wanted to use. And it's actually a cool feature that you can store all your code under your GitHub account and manually edit it. Then it syncs back to your Lovable project. Another major thing that I noticed was its technical judgment. It cannot be always trusted. The Anthropic API expected behavioral prompts in a certain schema, but Lovable implemented sending them in a different way. And this resulted in Claude replying differently than what I prompted it to. So overall, you actually need a solid technical understanding to ensure your application will work the way you want it to, and also that you don't end up paying more than you should for a service used. Once I released Story Partner, I asked for feedback from a couple of people. and I'd like to share two with you. So I asked the senior developer who has 15 years of experience to review the code that Lovable wrote. He said that it codes like a meteor developer who doesn't care about architecture. So this means that the product that it created is a good proof of concept, but it won't be a scalable and secure product. A senior designer gave me feedback on the value of Story Partner. He said, as a designer, I find it quite useful to get into the thinking of my product manager as early as possible. So while I personally maybe wouldn't use it to create user stories, using it as a coach, conversational partner to identify edge cases or states I hadn't thought of is quite valuable. Overall, what I hope you take away from this talk is that input and context matters when you're prompting an AI. You have to be very explicit in your prompt. So just imagine my experience that first I wrote, keep these guidelines in mind when you are writing user stories, but I actually had to rephrase it to, these are strict criterias, follow them. Also, AI is here to enhance our thinking, not to replace it. And it's very important to exercise critical thinking with AI. Use it for inspiration or to trigger conversations, because it's great for that. And it's also great for creating prototypes quickly, but not for scalable and secure products. However, such a solution that we built can be a useful product until you find product market fit as a startup. Thank you so much for watching. I hope now you feel like building something and doing experiments. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you drop me a line, I'm happy to send you the slides. And I invite you to try Story Partner. It's free. The only thing I ask is to give me feedback on it so I can improve it further for product teams. You can even check out the Lovable project I worked on. It's accessible on the Story Partner page via the second QR code. Thank you so much. Goodbye.